911 emergency.
I come over here to talk to my cousin's boyfriend, and when I get up there, I look and there's like a footprint with like blood. So I stepped in to see, and he's laying in the kitchen all bloody.
Is he breathing?
I don't know. And he's laying face down in a puddle of blood.
When Nathan found his friend 27 years old, Corey Lee Hughes, in a shocking and distressing condition with fatal gunshot wounds, his world turned upside down. But little did they know this was only the beginning of a much darker and more twisted story.
Is he dead?
No.
He's not dead.
But someone ruddy had the terrifying answers, which turned the whole case upside down.
Now somebody got a text message and he said he's leaving town.
And on his thing it says he does have guns.
And if he's already got a pistol, now hear about a murder, somebody's involved, okay?
Entangled in confusing leads, detectives struggled to identify the real perpetrator until they got this clue revealing the suspect had been right under their noses all along. But before proceeding to view the content, we kindly invite you to subscribe to our channel to stay updated on future uploads. So, let's dive in. On June 21, 2019, after the alarming 911 call made by Nathan Robertson, after seeing his friend Corey Lee Hughes covered in blood and begging for help, the Evansville, Indiana police responded immediately and arrived at the scene.
We didn't really know what we had or what we were going into.
Down in there in the kitchen, there's blood everywhere.
Police department!
The moment officers stepped inside the house, they noticed bloody footprints scattered across the floor, leading straight to the door, almost as if someone had stepped in the blood and hurried out. But the real shock was waiting for them deeper inside.
You could see straight into the kitchen. I remember seeing the victim's body laying down, face first in a pool of blood. You could see it looked like an exit wound from a gunshot to the left side of his head.
Despite being shot in the head, Corey was miraculously still alive and struggling to breathe, so the officers wasted no time and called paramedics to save his life. At the same time, they also began searching the house for any evidence but saw no weapons, knives, or anything like that. They carefully checked every corner to ensure the attacker wasn't still hiding, waiting for his next victim.
Police department, anybody down here? Make yourself known!
There wasn't anybody else in the house. I remember coming back into the living room and they were loading him up to take him to the hospital.
As Corey was rushed to the hospital, Detective Chris Jones and his team arrived to take over the investigation inside the house. They discovered a .380 shell casing lying on the blood-soaked floor. However, after a thorough search, they weren't able to find a gun used in the shooting, which led them to suspect that this was likely a homicide. But the missing weapon wasn't their only concern.
There were a lot of footprints in the blood leading around and out of the house, which means that Mr. Hughes wasn't shot and then an offender run out immediately.
Fortunately, the bloody footprints were still clear and showed a distinct shoe pattern, which appeared to be from a pair of Nike Air Force Ones. If they could find those shoes with blood on them, it might lead them straight to the shooter. The detectives knew this could be a critical piece of evidence, and they understood their first step towards it.
I didn't see any actual scenes of broken furniture, knocked over chairs, broken glass. Leads us to believe that the, offender was allowed into the home and Mr. Hughes was kind of taken by surprise.
While officers continued processing the scene, the detectives turned their attention to Nathan, the 911 caller, to learn exactly what he saw when he arrived at the house.
So when you arrived, you just found...
The door was open a little bit, the main door. Like, I looked through the door and I seen like a footprint of blood.
Right.
Nathan had come to Corey's house to buy a TV. As Corey was clearing out his belongings before moving to Oregon, he had asked his friends to help sell his stuff to gather some extra money.
His plan was to go out to Oregon to do a 6-month stint, see if he liked it. If he didn't, then he would just come back home.
However, amidst the packing and selling, Corey was deeply worried about his 3 kids, who he shared with his ex-girlfriend Megan Frazier. The two had recently ended their 5-year relationship, and though he was leaving, he didn't want to abandon the children.
Corey was a proud dad. He really was,
They were his proudest moments. Me and Corey had been separated for about 3 weeks. We really tried to make a relationship work towards the end, and we really didn't want to give our family up. All we really wanted to make sure in life was that the kids were happy.
I remember our last phone call, him telling me that he loved me and that he would be back.
She had no idea it would be the last conversation they'd ever have back at the scene. After speaking with Nathan, the detective began to suspect that this might be a robbery gone wrong. To support the theory, officers combed through every corner of the house again, and that's when they found something important.
A wallet was located. The wallet was kind of hidden with $1,500 of cash was in the wallet.
There were drawers open and things of that nature. So the person was there looking for something.
Along with the discovery, they also recovered Corey's cell phone, which became their first real lead in the investigation.
At 7:17, Corey texted a friend who was taking him to the airport that day. It gives us a time frame. Something happened after 7:17 and before the 911 call came in at 7:35.
With the time frame now clear, officers began talking to neighbors, hoping someone might have seen or heard something suspicious. They canvassed the area asking if anyone had been out at the time, but no one could provide any useful information. Soon the news of Corey's shooting reached his ex-girlfriend Megan, who, being deeply worried, rushed to the scene to be by Corey's side.
Okay, well, they're down at the hospital with the gentleman.
Can you please tell his family what's going on? Somebody.
We're trying to figure out what's going on.
Is he dead?
No.
He's not dead.
Megan had a gut feeling that something wasn't right, so she ran to the hospital as quickly as she could. But when she arrived, Corey was still in surgery and she was told to wait outside, unprepared for what was about to come that would change her life forever.
A doctor finally came out and asked me to follow him, and I just remember him telling me, "I'm sorry, we did everything we can."
Sadly, Corey couldn't survive the bullet that had pierced his head and was officially pronounced dead, turning the investigation into a murder case. At the crime scene, the officers sprang into action, remembering that nearly every house in the area had a CCTV camera outside. They immediately began checking for cameras in the neighborhood, knowing that they could provide valuable clues.
House that had a camera to the east of where the victim's house was and across the street. When you see a camera like that, I mean, you do get a little excited.
This camera in particular faced directly towards Corey's house, which made the officers hopeful that it might have captured something, perhaps a person or a vehicle near the house, around the time of the shooting, and sent the footage to the police department for further analysis.
Camera's motion activated. Whenever something happened closer to the camera, it would activate.
The camera does not record until it sees motion at some point.
Corey had sent a text to his friend at 7:17 a.m., and Nathan called 911 at 7:35 a.m. So the officers focused on reviewing footage from around that time. They started by looking at recordings from 7 a.m. to see if any motion was captured that could have triggered the cameras. Unfortunately, nothing suspicious showed up, so they decided to shift their attention to the exact time of the 911 call and zoomed in on the footage where Nathan's car was parked.
Corey's house was 5-6 houses down on the other side of the street. Once we found Nate Robertson's vehicle, it was parked directly in front of Corey's front door. We knew the position of any vehicles that were parked in front of Corey's house prior to Nate Robertson arriving.
Once they figured out the precise position of the car, they returned to review the clips from around 7:23 a.m., and that's when they spotted something strange.
The clip shows a white SUV parked in front of Corey's house, but you could not distinguish the make or model of the vehicle at that time.
While the car can be seen, there was no sign of anyone entering or leaving either the car or Corey's house. And after a short time, the car disappeared from view. However, the camera had several different angles recording in multiple directions. When the officers reviewed this footage, they discovered that one of the angles was pointed directly out into the street, giving them a broader view of the car.
As the white SUV drove past after leaving Corey's house, you got a better image of the vehicle. It was a Chevy Trailblazer. You could see that the rear rim of the passenger side tire was different from the rim of the front tire. It was a darker colored rim.
The car had a sunroof, a roof rack, and appeared to be a longer version of a Chevy Trailblazer, making it stand out with several unique features. Despite this, the officers couldn't make out the driver or get a clear view of the license plate from any of the camera angles. However, they knew this vehicle was the most important lead they had, one that could potentially guide them straight to the killer.
We sent out a still image of the vehicle to all the department police officers and to try to get information on the vehicle if the officers could locate it.
As the search for the SUV began, Corey's family arrived in Evansville devastated by the loss. They were heartbroken, especially since they weren't even allowed to say their final goodbyes to him.
I said, I don't care. I said, I want to see my son, bring him, take me to him or something. They said that he was shot in the left temple. And I just couldn't believe it. It's still hard to believe.
We just wondered how, who, and why.
At the crime scene, someone seemed to have the answers everyone was looking for. A woman approached the officers with a vital tip as she asked them there was someone they needed to investigate. She had a name in mind and strongly believed that this person might be responsible for Corey's death.
Somebody got a text message and he said he's leaving town. And I'm going to tell you where they're at. Or I can take somebody there.
This is Benjamin Bates, and he's Instagramming that he's leaving town. Benjamin Bates, he's got a tattoo right here.
And on his thing that says he does have guns.
Ben Brace and Corey had been close friends for years, but according to the woman, Ben also owned a gun, and she feared he might have been the one to kill Corey. The officers didn't have all the details yet, but they were sure of one thing. They couldn't let their first suspect slip away, so they headed straight to Ben's last known address.
In dealing with a person of interest of this nature, we want to take a lot of precautions. One, that this person could potentially be armed and whatnot. So we just surround the house and try to call him out to come meet the officers.
Can we talk to the dude in your house? Can we talk to the dude in there?
But the person who actually answered the door was Ben's friend James Leslie. When the officers tried to speak with James, he revealed that Ben had come to his house around 8 or 8:30 a.m. that morning. But the real surprise was about to come.
And he's already got a pistol. I hear about a murder. So somebody's involved, okay? There's wouldn't be guns around. Somebody would be involved in something stupid.
According to him, Ben had been obsessively talking about a murder, which immediately raised the officers' suspicions. They wondered if he was potentially referring to Corey's murder, and they knew that from 2 firearms, that Ben owned one could be the murder weapon and used to kill Corey. Just as the officers were trying to connect all the dots, Ben himself suddenly appeared there.
I want lawyers because, like they said, I do have the right to plead my Fifth Amendment because I know for a fact that I have nothing to do with it. Why am I being arrested? If I'm getting arrested...
You're not being arrested, you're being detained.
Why am I being detained?
Because they want to talk to you.
With plenty of reasons to consider Ben the primary suspect, the officers brought him downtown for questioning.
Were you over there at all yesterday? I've been telling Corey off and on for a while. I mean, he's always been a good friend to me.
During the interrogation, Ben admitted he had been at Corey's house the day before the shooting, but claimed he left shortly after with a friend.
Corey's been selling his stuff recently, right? You know about that, right? Gave her a bunch of clothes, gave me some things. Right. So he's had a lot of money around there. Had you told anybody that you had any money around the house? No. You didn't tell anybody? No.
To verify his story, officers conducted a thorough search of Ben's house, looking for any incriminating evidence like blood traces, cash, cell phones, data transferring devices, or ammunition that could tie him directly to Corey's murder. And it didn't take long before they found exactly what they had been suspecting.
Guns were recovered from the home where Benjamin Bates was located. Those firearms ended up being BB guns. A BB gun would not be capable of inflicting the injury that Corey Hughes sustained.
Back at the station, investigators pressed Ben for details about his movements the night before.
1:30 or 1:45, I don't even remember. After that, I did not go back. Did you have the same clothes on all day yesterday and today? What even changed?
Ben claimed that after leaving Corey's house around 2 p.m., he went to a convenience store to pick up some items. To confirm his alibi, officers also visited the store and reviewed the CCTV footage. But what they saw caught them off guard. Ben was clearly captured on camera walking into the store with his friend. When they zoomed in, they noticed that he was wearing the exact same clothes during the interrogation as he had been wearing in the footage.
Footage of them at the convenience store before is important, that they didn't change clothing. There could be possible evidence on the clothing if he was the shooter.
After thoroughly examining Ben from head to toe, the investigators found no traces of blood on his clothes, something they would have expected if he had killed Corey. Even the tread pattern on his shoes didn't match the bloody footprints from the crime scene. All the evidence seemed to point to one conclusion, that Ben wasn't involved in Corey's murder. But if Ben wasn't the killer, then who was?
Do you have any idea who would want to hurt Corey? I don't know. I really don't. Dude, hopefully he's killed and everybody bothered him.
During questioning, he revealed that he had been staying with Corey for the past few days, and several people had been visiting Corey during that time to buy his belongings. However, one person stood out to him, a visitor who had caught his attention for reasons he couldn't shake.
And the bigger black guy was the guy that was trying to hide over the bush and brought the iPad there. Like, I think that in a way is so kind of tied together, but I know nothing about the whole entire story.
Among those people, there was a black male whose behavior stood out to him as strange. However, the officers had no idea who this man was or what his connection to Corey might have been. Even after all the effort, days passed without any leads, and it began to feel like finding this mysterious individual would be impossible. Just as the investigation seemed to hit a dead end, a surprising tip came in from an unknown source which breathed new life into the case.
Get a name from an informant of Brandon Brown. He drives a white SUV. Brandon Brown actually knows Corey and knew that he was selling property to move to out of state.
Brandon somehow already knew Corey. When officers dug into his background, they discovered he had a criminal history. This past record had disqualified him from legally owning a firearm, making him an even more intriguing lead. With this new information, the investigators decided to revisit Corey's phone records to see if there was any contact between him and Brandon. During that time, they found that Brandon had called Corey at 7:08 a.m. on the morning of June 21st, just minutes before the shooting.
This was a very, very big break in the case, and we felt that that was something we had to move on very, very quickly.
The address officers had been given was one they had passed several times, but they never spotted the SUV. However, in the late afternoon, one officer finally noticed the white SUV outside Brandon's house. The tire tread on the vehicle matched exactly what they had seen in the CCTV footage. The officer suddenly saw Brandon and his wife Jessica leave the house and get into the car. The moment the SUV pulled away, the officer quickly alerted the local patrol, who immediately began following the vehicle.
Hey, you step out the car, man. You say you turn away from him.
He didn't appear nervous, pretty calm, cool, and kind of was accepting of what was happening.
You don't have any ID? You have a driver's license? You have a state ID?
They were able to stop the car and brought both Brandon and Jessica to the police department for further questioning.
Hey, Brandon. How you doing? Good. Any idea why you're down here? All I was doing was trying to enjoy my son, y'all, and church away.
Brandon seemed oddly calm during the questioning, more so than the investigators had initially thought. He was also open with the information, which made them briefly wonder if he might be another false lead.
Yeah, I went into his house. Yeah, I been to Corey's house. I went to Corey's house Thursday night.
While he admitted to being with Corey the day before, on June 20th. What he didn't know was that the investigators already had footage of his white SUV from June 21st.
We got some questions for that one. Your trailblazer. Is there anything on the trailblazer that makes it stick out? What about the wheels? My grandfather came over and helped me change that. Which one's that? On the passenger side. Is this your... It looks like mine, but I know a white one has one just like yours. Just like yours? Yeah. Has the same tire, same... Yeah.
When the investigators showed Brandon the picture of the SUV, his reaction was unusually casual. He dismissed it, suggesting that it could have been someone else driving, or that someone else might have had the same car with Brandon. Unwilling to open up, the focus shifted to his wife Jessica. She seemed more genuine than her husband, showing no signs of nervousness or deception.
Okay. Would this be yours with the missing hubcap?
They then showed her the picture of the SUV, but they didn't tell her the exact location to see if she would offer any new details or insights.
Yeah, that is one.
That was yours?
Yeah, because we had a flat tire that blew out, and we had to change the tire.
Okay. Oh, yeah, well, so is that a spare tire on there?
Yeah, it's a spare tire.
Does it have a sunroof as well?
Yes, it does.
From Jessica's account, the investigators were now certain that it was Brandon's car in the footage. However, they still didn't know who had been driving the SUV that day. Racing against time, to get closer to the truth, they expanded their search to find that one crucial clue or another CCTV that could provide the final breakthrough they needed in the case.
You really want to confirm that he's the sole occupant of the vehicle. That way, that would rule out anybody who was a passenger possibly being involved.
Soon, their search led them to two convenience stores, located between Corey's house and Brandon's. So they decided to check the CCTV footage from these stores to see if any suspicious activity had been recorded on the morning of the shooting and track Brandon's movements. After carefully going through the footage, they finally discovered what they wanted.
The Trailblazer can be seen pulling in a gas station about 6 blocks away from Corey's home. We know that this vehicle was in the area specifically at the time when Corey was still alive. We're just hoping to get positive identification of Brandon driving that vehicle.
While watching the next clip, they caught Brandon getting out of the SUV and walking into the convenience store. This footage was crucial because it allowed them to closely examine what clothes he was wearing, especially his shoes. When they zoomed in on his footwear, their suspicions were confirmed. He was wearing the same Nike Air Force Ones that matched the prints found at the crime scene.
This particular type of shoe was same as the footprints that were left in the blood at the scene.
The footage from a nearby gas station showed him just 6 blocks away from the scene. Only minutes before, another camera captured him crossing the street from Corey's house. With all the evidence now in place, the detectives were certain that it was Brandon who had driven his SUV to Corey's house on June 21st and killed him, now armed with a search warrant for Brandon's house. The officers were ready to take their next step.
Officers are looking for cash, blood evidence, weapons, clothing with blood on it.
Though the investigators didn't find any bloody clothes at Brandon's house, they suspected he might have already gotten rid of them. However, they did discover something even more terrible.
One was a Beretta 9mm, and the other firearm was a Bertha 380. We have a 380 casing at the scene, and one of the firearms recovered is a 380.
They collected all the guns, casings, and projectiles from the house, including the one mentioned in Corey's autopsy, and sent them to the lab for analysis. As the tests were underway, the investigators confronted Brandon with all the evidence they had gathered. This time, as they laid out the facts, Brandon's calm demeanor began to crack, and he became visibly nervous and uncomfortable, realizing that with all the cards on the table, he had no way to escape the truth.
You haven't been 100% true.
At that point, I knew it was time to really start interrogating him in a manner of trying to get to the truth of what happened.
Do you want to tell me about that morning? Did things get out of control?
Finally, under pressure, Brandon broke down and presented his own version of events.
What happened at the house?
We started knocking on the door and I just felt something wasn't right.
Okay.
He explained that on that morning he went to Corey's house to buy some items. However, he felt something off, so he decided to bring a firearm with him for protection.
He just clocked out.
Okay. When you say clocked out, what do you mean?
Just like the switch went on him.
So he was angry? Okay, so it was the kitchen knife?
And at that point, he just kind of blacked out and heard a bang.
According to him, when he arrived, Corey was acting strangely and had a knife in his hand. Then, in a sudden burst of fear, Corey slashed at him. He claimed that at that moment everything went blurry, and the next thing he remembered was hearing a gunshot.
Okay. Did you have a gun?
He got evidence, man, so...
Is it the 380 from the house?
We both know what that is, man.
Brandon's story seemed to make sense at first, especially since there were no signs of a struggle at the crime scene, and Corey had no defensive wounds. The way Corey was shot also suggested he might have been attacked from behind, which aligned with Brandon's story. But as the investigation progressed, and with Brandon's confession, the detectives began to feel that there was more to the case, and Brandon was charged with the murder of Corey.
Corey had been on social media flashing a lot of money around. Brandon made contact with him and went over there with the full intent to rob it.
Corey was still at the house and hadn't left yet, and the ruse was probably to buy something from Corey.
When Brandon arrived at Corey's house, he found Corey walking towards the kitchen, likely to grab the items that were supposed to be sold. Seeing an opportunity, he quickly shot Corey in the head from behind, catching him off guard. After the shooting, he searched the house for money, but time was against him. He was in a rush and couldn't afford to waste any more moments. So he left without taking anything. What Brandon didn't realize, however, was that the neighborhood was lined with multiple CCTV cameras. These cameras end up being the key to his downfall, capturing the evidence that eventually led to his arrest. On June 8, 2020, the case came to an end when Brandon Brown pleaded guilty to the murder of Corey Lee Hughes. He was sentenced to 65 years in prison. For Corey's family, especially his children, the sentence brought little comfort. They were left to cope with the heartbreaking reality of living the rest of their lives without their father, struggling with the pain of his loss.
Everything you took away from my children. When my kids graduate high school, their dad doesn't get to be there. When my daughter gets married, her dad don't get to walk her down the aisle.
So I just kind of tell myself, Corey's down in Evansville, he's working, and, he's busy, and that helps me get through the day.
It left a huge hole in our family that will never get back.
We'll never have a conversation with him. We'll never be able to give him a hug.
I just miss hanging out with him, all the small things. Holidays, birthdays, everything.
Me and my family put together a bloom release for Corey and to let Corey know how much we love him and that we're going to do everything we can to make sure that he's not forgotten.
I hope you enjoyed this video. If yes, please like and subscribe to our channel. It will help us a lot and motivate us to continue making videos like this.